The sun had barely risen, casting a golden glow on the waves as I settled onto the public beach, ready to enjoy a peaceful morning. The sound of the ocean was soothing, and I was looking forward to a day of solitude. But little did I know, this serene moment would soon be interrupted by an unexpected confrontation. As I laid out my towel and made myself comfortable, I noticed her. Let's call her Linda. She was standing near the entrance of the beach, her eyes scanning the area like a hawk. There was something unsettling about her demeanor. Her gaze was intense, almost predatory. At first, I didn't recognize her, but the way she glared at me sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just a passing glance. It was a stare that felt like it could burn through steel. I tried to ignore her, focusing on the calming sound of the waves. But the tension in the air was palpable. Her presence seemed to grow more oppressive with each passing minute. Soon, she began walking toward me, her steps deliberate, her posture stiff, and her eyes locked onto mine. I could feel my heartbeat quicken. The peaceful morning had evaporated, replaced by an uneasy anticipation. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp and commanding. "You can't stay here," she said, her tone filled with an authority that felt completely out of place on a public beach. Her words hit me like a slap. What was she talking about? The beach was open to everyone. There were no signs indicating otherwise. But as I looked at her, I realized this wasn't just about the beach. It was about power. Her eyes were cold and calculating, and it was clear she had a deeper agenda. I tried to explain that I had every right to be there, but she wasn't having it. Her demands escalated, and she began quoting rules I had never heard of, threatening to call the police. The more she ranted, the clearer it became that she had no legal ground to stand on. This was a game to her, a power play, and she was enjoying every minute of it. But I wasn't going to back down. The idea of being forced off a public space where I had every legal right to be felt like a violation. I stood my ground, refusing to let her make me feel like an intruder. The more she pushed, the more I realized I wasn't dealing with an ordinary person. She was relentless, and I had no idea how far she would go to prove she was in charge. Just as I thought she might escalate things further, she pulled out her phone, ready to call someone. My heart sank, but I refused to give in. I wasn't going to let her bully me into submission. Little did I know, her actions were about to backfire in a way she never expected. As she raised her phone to her ear, a loud voice pierced the air. She froze. Unbeknownst to her, a group of beachgoers had been watching the entire interaction unfold. They had seen everything, and as she turned back, trying to regain control, she found herself facing not just me, but a growing crowd of witnesses who weren't about to let her continue with her charade. The realization hit her like a brick wall. For the first time since she had arrived, I saw doubt in her eyes. She had overestimated her ability to bully someone into submission, and now the tide was turning. What had begun as a simple confrontation was quickly becoming a public spectacle. The crowd wasn't on her side anymore. It was clear that her attempts to intimidate me had backfired, and now her credibility was crumbling. The whispers grew louder, and I could see her realizing that she was losing the battle she thought was so easily hers. But what she didn't understand was that in trying to push me out, she had underestimated the power of the people around us. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It had become theirs too. Then, something unexpected happened. A woman from the back of the crowd stepped forward. She wasn't the loudest, but her presence carried a calm authority that made everyone pause. She explained, in no uncertain terms, how Linda's behavior was not only unjust but illegal. As it turned out, she wasn't just a regular beachgoer. She was a local attorney. Her words were clear, sharp, and carried the weight of someone who understood the law better than Linda ever would. It was like watching a chess master checkmate an overconfident player in one swift move. For the first time, Linda seemed to grasp the enormity of her mistake. She had thought she could walk onto this public space and push people around without consequences, but now the real power had shifted. The attorney's calm explanation about the legal rights of beachgoers, coupled with the support of the crowd, made it abundantly clear that Linda had no leg to stand on. The smug expression that had once dominated her face was now replaced by one of frustration and disbelief. She had miscalculated every move, and it was starting to dawn on her that the consequences of her actions were much greater than she could have ever anticipated. As I stood there, watching the spectacle unfold, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about the beach anymore. It was about something much larger. It was about standing up for what was right, even when faced with the seemingly insurmountable forces of entitlement and arrogance. The quiet confidence I had been trying to maintain now bubbled up into something more palpable. I wasn't just defending my right to be there. I was standing up against the very concept of someone imposing their will on others, using nothing but manipulation and false authority to get what they wanted. Linda's grip on the situation was slipping, and with every word the attorney spoke, the walls around her grew tighter. She began to stammer, unable to come up with a defense. Her claims became more disjointed and incoherent. It was like watching someone unravel before your eyes. Her mask of control was fading away in front of a growing audience. But the real shock came when the crowd, once passive observers, began to cheer, not in a loud, rowdy way, but in a quiet, unspoken show of solidarity. They weren't just watching this happen anymore. They were participating in a moment of collective justice, of defiance against an injustice that had tried to assert itself without reason. As Linda stood there, defeated and humiliated, the attorney turned to me, offering a reassuring nod. She didn't need to say anything. Her calm demeanor had already conveyed everything. It was done. Linda had lost. The power she had so easily wielded had crumbled beneath her, and now she was nothing more than a figure of ridicule. I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders, replaced by a sense of relief. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for everyone who had been watching, everyone who had been silently waiting for someone to stand up to the bully. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the universe has a way of delivering justice when we least expect it. And when it does, it comes in the form of something as simple as a public beach, a group of determined strangers, and the kind of karma that makes you believe in righting wrongs. Linda's defeat, however, was not as graceful as I had hoped. She stood there, her eyes darting around in a futile attempt to regain some semblance of control, but it was too late. The crowd had already made their judgment, and her attempts to salvage any shred of dignity only seemed to dig her deeper into a hole of humiliation. She tried to brush herself off, straighten her posture, and mutter something under her breath, but the more she tried to assert herself, the more ridiculous she appeared. What struck me the most was the realization that this wasn't just about Linda anymore. Her actions, her sense of entitlement, had become a symbol for a much larger issue that many of us had quietly faced at some point in our lives. The battle against those who believe they can impose their will on others simply because they think they have the power to do so. As the attorney finished speaking, she turned to walk away, and the crowd, without saying a word, began to disperse. Their silent victory hung in the air like a badge of honor. There was no applause, no dramatic moment of triumph, just a sense of quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. Linda, now standing alone, was forced to walk away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She had come to the beach with the intention of pushing someone around, but she was leaving with nothing but the bitter taste of failure. The overwhelming sense of karma was palpable, and I could almost feel it hanging in the air like the cool breeze off the ocean. The same ocean that had been so calming and peaceful just hours earlier now felt like the perfect backdrop to this moment of justice. As I packed up my belongings, still in awe of what had just transpired, I couldn't help but reflect on the events that had unfolded. It had started as a simple day at the beach, one that I had expected to pass without incident, but in a twist of fate, it had turned into something far more meaningful. In the span of just a few hours, I had witnessed a woman's arrogance crumble under the weight of truth and collective action. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the greatest battles aren't the ones fought with fists or legal documents. They are the ones fought with integrity, with standing firm in the face of injustice, and with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing what is right. As I walked away from the beach, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't anticipated. The confrontation had been intense, and for a moment, it had felt like the stakes were high. But as the situation resolved itself, it became clear that the real victory wasn't about winning a battle, it was about restoring balance. Linda had thought she could overpower me, but in the end, it was her own actions that had led to her downfall. The universe had a way of correcting itself, and sometimes it took moments like these to remind us that no one is above the law, no one is above fairness, and no one should ever underestimate the power of standing up for what is right. It was an unforgettable experience, one that I would carry with me for a long time. The memory of that moment, the feeling of standing tall, of knowing that I had fought not just for myself, but for everyone who had silently watched and hoped for something to change, would stay with me. And even though the day had started with a sense of uncertainty and tension, it ended with a profound sense of justice that could only come from seeing someone like Linda, who thought she could control others, being served the instant karma she so richly deserved. As I walked away from the beach, a sense of calm washed over me. The confrontation, the tension, and the unexpected turn of events still echoed in my mind, but there was a newfound clarity in my thoughts. The memory of Linda's defeated posture, her attempts to salvage a situation that was beyond saving, lingered in the back of my mind like a quiet victory. I couldn't help but marvel at the irony of it all, how such an ordinary day had spiraled into something so extraordinary. What had begun as an innocent trip to the beach had turned into a battle for fairness. And in the end, it wasn't just my rights that had been protected, but the integrity of everyone who had silently witnessed the entire ordeal. It wasn't just about standing up to Linda. It was about standing up to the notion that people like her could get away with anything just because they thought they could bend the rules to their advantage. The fact that the crowd had gathered, quietly supporting the right cause, was a reminder that people weren't as passive as some might think. The moment had shown me that even in the face of an unjust and entitled individual, the power of community and solidarity could bring about change. It wasn't about raising fists or shouting louder than the opposition. It was about having the strength to stand firm and let the truth do the talking. In the following days, news of what had happened at the beach began to spread. Word of Linda's failed attempt to evict me reached more than just the people who had been there that day. People from the local neighborhood, even those who had never stepped foot on the beach, started to take notice. The story was shared, discussed, and analyzed. Slowly but surely, it became more than just an isolated incident. It became a symbol of resistance against the type of entitlement that so many people had come to expect from figures like Linda. I began to realize that my small victory was part of something larger, a ripple that had spread through the community, encouraging others to stand up for themselves when they felt wronged. But while the community rallied behind the story, Linda's fate took a much different turn. Her arrogance had cost her not just her credibility, but her social standing as well. The same people who had once seen her as an authority figure, someone who could impose her will on others without consequence, now saw her for what she truly was, an arrogant bully who had tried to use her false power to dominate others. Her reputation, once built on intimidation, was now in tatters. And though she tried to salvage whatever she could of her dignity by distancing herself from the whole incident, it was clear that the damage had been done. The beach had become a symbol of her defeat, and no matter how much she tried to rewrite the narrative, the truth had already taken root. For me, the story was a bittersweet reminder of how sometimes the greatest victories come when we least expect them. It wasn't the victory itself that mattered most, but the realization that standing up for what's right can have a far-reaching impact. The experience had opened my eyes to the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity, of not allowing others to take away your sense of self-respect. It had taught me that sometimes the most powerful weapon you have is your ability to simply say, "No, this isn't right," and let the consequences unfold on their own. As the weeks went by, I started to notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere around the beach. It wasn't dramatic, but there was a quiet sense of pride in the air. The locals spoke about it with a sense of accomplishment, as though they too had played a part in putting Linda in her place. It became clear to me that though the battle had been between me and one entitled woman, the real victory was for everyone who had ever been pushed around by someone who thought they could get away with it. We had all witnessed the power of standing together, of not letting anyone intimidate us or tell us what we could or couldn't do. It wasn't just a beach anymore. It had become a reminder that no matter how small or insignificant a fight might seem, standing up for what's right can spark change. And as I continued to visit the beach in the weeks to come, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, knowing that what had started as a simple day under the sun had turned into something far greater, a small victory for the underdog, one that would resonate for a long time. As time passed, The events at the beach seemed to fade into the background of everyday life, but their impact lingered longer than I could have ever anticipated. The sense of justice that had prevailed that day became a quiet undercurrent in the community, something that was discussed in passing but never forgotten. People began to share their own stories of standing up against unreasonable authority, and the memory of that day served as a beacon for those who felt powerless in similar situations. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us who had ever been wronged and silenced. The beach, once a simple escape, had transformed into something greater, an embodiment of collective resilience. Linda, however, could not shake the consequences of her actions. She tried to move on, burying the embarrassment beneath a facade of indifference, but the ripple effect of her defeat followed her everywhere she went. She found herself ostracized from local events, ignored by those who had once rallied around her. The more she tried to control the narrative, the more obvious it became to everyone that her attempts to intimidate others had failed. Her power, once so tangible and self-assured, had crumbled. What was once a symbol of entitlement had turned into a cautionary tale of overreaching, reminding others that no one, no matter how high they placed themselves, was beyond the reach of justice. For me, the experience wasn't just about confronting one individual. It was about something far more profound. It had been a reminder that standing up for what's right, even in the face of overwhelming odds, could make all the difference. It wasn't about the momentary satisfaction of winning a single argument, but about the long-lasting effect of empowering others to do the same. The lessons I had learned were subtle but significant. I had learned that when you stand firm in the face of adversity, when you refuse to let someone impose their will on you, you don't just protect your own rights. You inspire others to do the same. I continued to visit the beach, but with a deeper sense of connection to it. It wasn't just the place where I had spent a quiet day. It had become a symbol of the struggle for fairness, a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing can feel like an uphill battle. But it also showed me that just as quickly as a situation can spiral out of control, it can also turn in your favor when you refuse to back down. It was a powerful feeling, and one that carried me through the days that followed. As the weeks turned into months, I often found myself reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The little moments, the tension in the air as Linda approached, the crowd gathering to support the cause, and the quiet, collective satisfaction of seeing her defeated. The experience had changed me. It had taught me that justice doesn't always look the way you expect it to. It wasn't some dramatic courtroom scene or an epic showdown. It was the simple act of standing your ground and trusting that what was right would eventually prevail. And though I knew Linda's defeat wasn't the end of the story, there would always be more people like her out there. I took comfort in the fact that we had taken a stand. The victory that day wasn't just mine. It was for everyone who had ever felt voiceless, for everyone who had ever been made to feel small. It was a reminder that no matter how powerful someone thinks they are, no one is invincible when it comes to the truth. In the end, the beach wasn't just a place where I went to relax. It had become a place of quiet victory, a place that held the memory of a battle fought not with fists or loud speeches, but with courage, solidarity, and the unwavering belief that justice would always find its way.